Hello, this is Anton Nazi
and Triumferati.
doing a video on comparative and absolute advantage. The only reason why this video is being shown is because of this guy. He was the economist who introduced the theory of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is the benefit or advantage of an economy to be able to produce a commodity at a lesser opportunity cost than the entities is referred as a comparative advantage in international trade. This guy suggested that every country should trade to each other as it is beneficial for everyone. I know this might sound unfamiliar to you guys, but I will explain it in the further video. I know you always wondered why a powerful country like the US should trade with other countries. I mean, US is able to produce every good to meet the demands of its citizens. For example, they produce wheat, computers, cars, hamburgers, DVDs, etc., So in other words, they can produce anything, so why trade with other countries? But remember, that always other countries like England, China, Russia, Germany, France are also able to produce all of these things. So all of this would be explained by a simple economic concept, which is the comparative advantage. In order to understand the comparative advantage, we must analyze the opportunity cost. So what is the opportunity cost? The opportunity cost is simply the value of what is foregone for the cost of giving something up to get something else. So if the US is going to produce all of those goods, what is the US going to give up? Or if this guy decides to watch movies instead of studying economics, he is sacrificing a good grade in order to watch a movie. If we want to understand the concept of comparative advantage and absolute advantage, we must assume that there are only two countries in the world which produce the same set of goods. The first country being US and the second country being England. Now let's say that both produce hamburgers and CDs. However, US is able to produce 150 hamburgers and 300 CDs with a given amount of resources, while England is able to produce 40 hamburgers and 120 CDs with the same amount of resources. We can see here that the US can produce more of both goods with a given amount of resources, which means that they are more efficiently using these resources, and thus having an absolute advantage over England. So when a country is able to produce more efficiently both goods compared to another country, it can be said that the country has an absolute advantage. So again, why should the US trade with England if they are capable of producing both of the goods in a more efficient manner? The only reason for this is the comparative advantage. So what is comparative advantage? To understand this, we must recall the concept of opportunity cost earlier mentioned, meaning that the country who is able to produce at a lower opportunity cost compared to the country, it is said that it has a comparative advantage on that good. So we said earlier that the US is producing 150 hamburgers and 300 CDs, while England is producing 40 hamburgers and 120 CDs. We also said that the US has an absolute advantage over England since it is producing more of both goods compared to England. So why should we trade? The reason for this is that comparative advantage allows one country to sacrifice less resources to make a specific item compared to the other. So to determine which country has the comparative advantage in our example, we look at each opportunity cost, meaning that how much hamburgers are sacrificed to produce CDs or vice versa. To find out how much hamburgers US and England sacrifices to produce one CD, we must divide the number of hamburgers with the number of CDs they produce. Same procedure would be done for CDs, just divide the number of CDs with the number of hamburgers. So it is clear that England sacrifices only 0.33 CDs to produce one hamburger, where US is sacrificing 0.5, which means that England has a comparative advantage over US in producing hamburgers. On the other hand, we can see that the US sacrifices only 2 hamburgers to produce a CD compared to England, which sacrifices 3. So we can say that the US has a comparative advantage in producing CDs.
Created using Powtoon.